When I think about existence, one of the first things that strikes me is how strange our position in the universe really is. We live on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star in a galaxy with hundreds of billions of other stars, and yet somehow we are able to look at the sky and wonder about it. Out of all the matter in the cosmos, some of it arranged itself in a way that became conscious enough to ask questions like, why are we here? Does life have a purpose? Is there something beyond what we can see? That alone already feels like a mystery. What fascinates me is not just the size of the universe, but the contrast between that vastness and our awareness of it. On one hand, we are incredibly small. If the universe disappeared tomorrow, it probably wouldn't notice that humanity was gone. But on the other hand, we are capable of reflecting on the entire cosmos, imagining its origins, and questioning our place within it. There is something deeply paradoxical about being both insignificant and deeply curious at the same time. For most of history, humans tried to resolve this tension by telling stories about the universe and about ourselves. These stories gave meaning to our lives and explained why we exist. They connected our daily experiences to something greater, and in many ways I understand why those stories are powerful. When you look at the night sky and feel how small you are, it is almost natural to search for an explanation that makes our existence feel intentional. But personally, I've always felt a bit of distance from absolute explanations. Not because I think they are meaningless, but because the universe itself seems far more complex than any simple story we might tell about it. The more we learn about reality, the more mysterious it appears, and that realization has shaped how I see questions about religion, purpose, and existence. I consider myself agnostic. I don't claim to know whether there is something beyond this universe or whether there is some deeper meaning behind life. In fact, I suspect that if such a meaning exists, it may be far beyond our ability to fully understand it. Our perspective is limited. We are trying to interpret the entire universe from a tiny corner of it, with minds that evolved simply to survive on this planet. And yet, despite all of this uncertainty, the questions themselves never disappear. Even if we cannot answer them completely, we still feel compelled to ask them. There is something deeply human about searching for meaning, even when we know the search might never be finished. In a strange way, that might be part of what makes existence so interesting in the first place. Throughout history, humans have tried to understand existence by creating stories about the universe. Different religions and cultures developed explanations for why we are here and what our lives mean. These narratives often place humanity at the center of everything, suggesting that the universe was created with us in mind. I understand why these ideas are powerful, because they give people a sense of direction and purpose in a reality that can otherwise feel overwhelming. But when I look at the universe as we know it today, it becomes harder for me to see it as something built entirely around us. The cosmos is unimaginably vast, filled with billions of galaxies and countless stars. When you step back and really think about that scale, it raises a simple but uncomfortable question. Are we truly the center of it all, or are we just a small part of something much bigger than we can currently understand? This doesn't mean that religious explanations must be wrong, or that life has no deeper meaning. It only means that our current stories might be incomplete. If there is a greater reality behind existence, it may be far more complex than any explanation we have created so far. And recognizing that possibility, at least to me, feels like a more honest way to approach these questions. And once you begin to consider that possibility, something interesting happens. Instead of feeling like meaning disappears, the universe starts to feel even more mysterious. The questions become deeper, and the search for understanding becomes more open. Rather than assuming we already have the final answers, we begin to see ourselves as explorers trying to understand a reality that might be far larger and more complex than we ever imagined. At some point, many people experience a moment where doubt begins to appear, not necessarily a rejection of belief, but a quiet question in the back of the mind. What if I'm not completely sure about this? For me, doubt was never something negative. It didn't feel like losing meaning. Instead, it felt like opening the door to a deeper way of thinking about reality. Doubt is often misunderstood. Many people see it as the enemy of belief, but I see it more as a tool for understanding. The moment you allow yourself to question something, you also allow yourself to explore it more honestly, instead of holding on to ideas simply because they were given to you. You start examining them, testing them, and thinking about whether they truly make sense to you. This way of thinking naturally leads to uncertainty. Once you accept the possibility that you might be wrong, you begin to realize how many things in life are not completely clear. But rather than finding that frightening, I find it strangely liberating. It means that the search for truth is still open. It means that we are still learning, still discovering, and still trying to understand a universe that is far more mysterious than our current explanations. And in a way, doubt becomes the beginning of a more honest relationship with reality. Instead of pretending to have certainty about things we cannot fully know, we allow ourselves to remain curious. We accept that understanding takes time, and that some questions might remain unanswered for much longer than we would like. One perspective that strongly shaped the way I think about these questions is the scientific approach to understanding the world. What I find interesting about science is that it does not begin with certainty. In fact, it begins with the opposite. It starts with the idea that we might be wrong, and that the only way to get closer to the truth is to question our assumptions and test our ideas against reality. Science is often misunderstood as a collection of facts, but in reality it is more of a method. It is a process of gradually refining our understanding of the world. A theory is never considered absolutely final. It is simply the best explanation we currently have based on the available evidence. And if new evidence appears, that explanation can change. This attitude requires a certain comfort with uncertainty. For me, this way of thinking naturally influences how I see larger existential questions. If we apply the same intellectual honesty to questions about existence, purpose, or the nature of reality, we have to admit that we simply do not know the full answer. There might be something beyond the universe as we understand it, or there might not be. At our current stage of knowledge, both possibilities remain open, and strangely, that openness does not make the universe feel empty to me. If anything, it makes it more fascinating. Instead of believing that the final answers have already been discovered, we are part of an ongoing process of discovery. Humanity is still trying to understand the nature of reality, and in many ways, we are only at the very beginning of that journey. Once you begin to accept uncertainty, something important changes in how you see the world. You stop expecting reality to give you perfectly clear and final answers to every question. Instead, you begin to live with probabilities, possibilities, and partial understandings. Many things become less about certainty and more about perspective. For me, this doesn't feel like a loss of meaning. In fact, it feels more honest. There are countless things we simply don't know yet, and pretending otherwise doesn't bring us any closer to the truth. I can hold beliefs and intuitions about the universe, but I also recognize that they may be incomplete or even wrong. Learning to live with uncertainty also changes how we approach existential questions. Instead of desperately searching for one final answer about the meaning of life, we begin to accept that some questions might remain open for a very long time, and that openness allows curiosity to remain alive. In many ways, life becomes more interesting when you allow space for uncertainty. The universe remains mysterious, and the search for understanding never truly ends. Rather than closing the story of existence with a final explanation, we continue exploring it one question at a time. Even though uncertainty can be intellectually honest, it can also be uncomfortable. As human beings, we naturally look for stability and clear answers. Questions about purpose, existence, and what lies beyond life can feel overwhelming, and it is understandable that many people prefer explanations that provide certainty. In many ways, our desire for answers is connected to a deeper psychological need. We want to feel that our lives matter and that our experiences are part of something meaningful. When the universe feels vast and indifferent, it can create a sense of vulnerability. Searching for definitive answers becomes a way of protecting ourselves from that feeling. But over time, I started to realize that not knowing does not have to be frightening. The absence of a complete answer does not mean that life is meaningless. It simply means that reality might be more complex than what our current understanding can capture. When I think about it this way, uncertainty stops feeling like a void and starts feeling like an open horizon. Instead of being trapped by the need for final answers, we are free to keep exploring the questions themselves. And sometimes the search for understanding can be just as meaningful as the answer we hope to find. Even though I accept that we may never fully understand the ultimate nature of reality, I still feel that life probably has some kind of meaning. I just don't think we are in a position to completely grasp it. Our perspective is limited, and whatever larger structure might exist behind the universe could be far beyond what our minds are capable of fully understanding. But interestingly, this uncertainty does not leave us without guidance for how to live. Even if we don't know the ultimate purpose of existence, we still experience the consequences of our actions in the world around us. We see how kindness helps people, how cruelty harms them, and how our choices affect the lives of others. Because of that, I've come to believe that doing good does not need to depend on certainty about God or about the final structure of reality. There is a philosophical idea, often associated with Kant's concept of the categorical imperative, that suggests we should act according to principles that we would want to become universal rules. In simple terms, we should treat others in ways that we would believe are right if everyone acted that way. So even in a universe that remains mysterious, this idea offers a practical way to live. We may not know the ultimate answers about why we are here, but we can still choose to make the world a little better for the people around us. And in the face of uncertainty, choosing to do good simply because it is good might be one of the most meaningful things we can do.